Well, thank you for having me here, everybody. It's a real honor to be here. I love this topic. I'm actually, since I left NASA, I've been working in the renewable energy space on a bunch of different projects. So this is a topic that's near and dear to my heart. But I want to talk about my space missions and some of the lessons I learned. And every good astronaut talk begins with launch. And it was kind of funny, when you leave, when you get dressed up in your suit, you drive about 5 miles. When I flew on the space shuttle, it was a trailer that they put us in. We called it the Astro Van. Now they're launching on SpaceX capsules, so they drive in a Tesla out to the launch pad. But there was a group of people around the launch pad they had guns. They were like the guards guarding the launch pad. So I launched, and a couple weeks later, we went back and did a talk just to share our mission with all kinds of people around the country. And our crew happened to go back to the security guys at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. So after our talk, I was talking to them, and they're very typical, stereotypical Hollywood Secret Service looking guys. And I said, why are you there with guns? Are you like, is Al-Qaeda attacking our space shuttle? Is there like terrorists in the swamp? And they said, no, sir, we're there to make sure you get on the shuttle. And after I had the experience of launching, I think they were telling the truth. I hope this has sound, by the way. I want to make sure there's sound here. So if you've never had a chance to see a launch, this is a friend of mine watched my first launch with his family, and this is just his home movie of my first space shuttle launch.
Yes! Oh my God, this is unbelievable. Tucker, don't drop that. Oh my God! Holy crap.
Wow.
Oh my God.
It's a pretty awesome experience. If you ever get a chance to see a launch, I highly recommend it. If you ever get a chance to launch on a rocket, I really highly recommend that too. But my first launch was on a space shuttle from Florida. I went again with the Russians from the same launch pad that Yuri Gagarin had launched from. So that was quite an experience. And I had a chance to spend a little over 7 months on space, eventually as the station commander. But my trip into space did not begin on the launch pad. It started when I was a little kid. And my mom took this embarrassing picture of me as a little kid. But the first book I read was one of those, that I remember reading, was one of those cardboard books with 1 line per page. I'm sure you have those in Estonia. And it was about Apollo. So I grew up with pictures of the space shuttle and galaxies on my wall. I wanted to be an astronaut since I was little. But that's a crazy dream. Like, nobody actually gets to be an astronaut, but that's what I wanted to do. And when I got to test pilot school, eventually I became an F-16 pilot. I went to Edwards Air Force Base in California, which is The Right Stuff. It's a great movie, great book. If you like space, I highly recommend The Right Stuff. And NASA said we're going to have a space shuttle class of astronauts. And so I said, I want to join. Everybody there wanted to be an astronaut. But I was still a student. I hadn't graduated from test pilot school. So I went through the process, and all of my friends, who all of them wanted to be astronauts, they were all 100% certain that I would not get picked. Because the other guys have more experience than you, the other guys are better looking than you are. They were just positive that I would not get selected. But I went ahead and did the process anyway, and I was lucky. I got picked to be an astronaut. I was the youngest astronaut at NASA, a shuttle pilot for a long time. And I learned a really important lesson, and that's something that I think applies to adults like here, it applies to kids. And that lesson is, don't tell yourself no. If there's some dream that you have, that you want to achieve in life, the first step is don't tell yourself no. If you want to be a doctor, you can't just say, I want to be a doctor. Words are cheap. You actually have to come up with a strategy. How are you going to get the education, the experience you need to be a doctor or a CEO or whatever it is you want to do? But that first step, don't tell yourself no, I think is the most important, and it's something that a lot of people don't ever get past that stage. So I got picked by NASA. I waited a long time, eventually got to launch on the space shuttle, and I ended up here at the International Space Station. My first flight, we finished building it. It was a 2-week mission. I was the shuttle pilot. we brought up the last modules to complete building the space station. And then I went back about 5 years later on a Russian Soyuz, spent 200 days in space on that mission, and ended up being the commander, did spacewalks, basically did everything. And so I spent a lot of my life here at the ISS. And there's a few questions that people ask about space. And the first one is, what is it like in space? And what it's like is it feels like you're falling. And the reason it feels like you're falling is because you're falling. There's a lot of gravity where the ISS is. It's only 400 kilometers above Earth. So if I drop this here, 1 second later it hits the ground. At the ISS, there's about 90% of Earth's gravity. So if I was in space and I let go of this, it would fall towards the center of the Earth almost the same distance. The difference is you're going 8 kilometers every second forward. So as you fall and move forward and fall and move forward, that makes a curve. And if you're at the exact right speed, it's the orbit. That's how you make an orbit. So the feeling of what it's like in space is that you're falling. And there's a really steep learning curve for your brain to understand what it's like in space. And it takes a few weeks before you're really good, astronaut or spaceman or whatever. It takes a couple weeks for your brain cells to figure out what's happening. Another aspect of life in space is getting your hair cut. It's kind of a mundane thing. On Earth, it's very simple. In space, it's simple for the men, or for me anyway. I just use the clippers and it takes me about 30 seconds and I have my hair cut. I was there with Samantha Cristoforetti. Are there any Italians here? There's always Italians. In every audience, there's Italians somewhere. They're everywhere. Samantha's Italian, and she's she's probably the most popular Italian on Earth. And so she wouldn't allow me to launch until I went with her to her hairdresser on Earth, and I had to learn how to cut women's hair. So after a few months, Samantha said, "All right, Terry, it's time to cut the hair." And we went down there, and I tell the joke, but it's true. I flew over Iraq and I did spacewalks. Cutting Samantha's hair was by far the most stressful thing I've ever done. So that would have been a disaster, but it came out okay. Another cool part of being in space is spacewalks. And on my first flight, I did not do any spacewalks. I was a shuttle pilot, and NASA never let shuttle pilots do spacewalks. The pilots had to be there to land the shuttle, so they didn't want us to float off into space. Somebody had to be there to land the shuttle. But on the space station flights, there's really no more pilots. The capsules are automated, so everybody does everything, and I had the privilege of doing 3 spacewalks in a week. And I could talk forever. The National Geographic book, I think you heard about, the biggest chapter in there is about spacewalks. I've written a lot about it, and they're amazing. They are physically hard work. The spacesuit is big. It's about 150 kilos. It's pressurized. You are on the clock. It's dangerous outside. You have this little thin visor, and if you break it, you have the rest of your life to plug the hole. It's a very dangerous experience. And so doing spacewalks was amazing, but it was also very intense. And if you look at this picture, I'm hanging on, I'm doing work, I'm very focused. And then just off to the right is the most beautiful thing you've ever seen. If you honestly cannot imagine how beautiful it is. And I had the sense that I was seeing creation from God's point of view. Like human beings were not meant to see this thing. And then I had to get back to work to do my work. And here's just a little GoPro short video of all the equipment you have. All that equipment is tethered and tied down, so you really have to keep track of it to not let it float away. But spacewalking was pretty amazing. But what I really want to do is share some of the photos that I took. This is the cupola module that I'm in. It was one of the 2 modules that I installed. It has 7 windows. There's 6 windows around you, and there's one above you, and it's on the bottom of the space station. So when you go into the cupola, you have to look up to see Earth. If I close my mind and I take myself to space, Earth is that way. But the reality is it's below the station, but that's just the the mentality, that's what we think of. And I always start with this picture. I have a couple 100,000 pictures, but I love this one because this was Typhoon Mysak. I saw 23 different hurricanes and typhoons. Mysak is by far the most impressive. That huge eye was so well defined. But the really amazing point of this image that I want you to see, if you look at it, there's a really thin blue line at the top, and that's our atmosphere. And every human being, I think there's 11 billion of us in history, is from below that little super thin mini line. And no human being is from above it. And no human being ever will be probably from above it. And if you want to go above it, you have to be in a big spacesuit and a spaceship. So I came away from my space flights with the thought that we only have planet A. There's no planet B. The rest of the universe is beautiful, and I love exploring, and I love the robots that go to Mars, but the reality is all of us, we got Earth, and that's it. This is something I'd never seen from the ground. One of the problems with being an astronaut is that your bucket list gets too big. So this is the Northern Lights, obviously. You guys can probably see it from Estonia here in another month or two. There's the United Kingdom. You can see the Earth because of the moon. The moon is shining down. But there's Norway and Denmark. You can see all that snow because of the moon. But the Northern Lights were incredible. There's Tallinn, just south of Helsinki, and St. Petersburg. The Northern Lights were beautiful. But the Southern Lights, the Aurora Australis, I didn't realize this, but the poles are not 180 degrees apart. They're kind of offset. So we actually fly through the Southern Lights sometimes. And in May and June is when you see them. But it's really otherworldly. This is an alien experience. It's not earthly to fly through this giant cloud. I felt like I was in a Star Trek movie at times flying through it. Now imagine, like, if you're in space and it's nighttime, you go down to the cupola, you close your eyes, turn all the lights off, let your eyes adjust, and then when you open them up, you see this. And this is just the Milky Way. Again, that reflection is from the moon. You can see the little thin blue line. At nighttime, there's a much, much, much thicker brown band that you see. It is very high, hundreds of kilometers up, atomic oxygen and nitrogen. There's a really thin atmosphere up there. But there's so many billions of stars, I was never able to pick out any constellations. Just this amazing, it's hard to see, there's too much light on the screen. If you come up here, it's a really cool video on the screen. There's a lot of stars in our galaxy. This is one orbit around Earth. It takes 90 minutes in real life. This is an orbit in 30 seconds. So you can see in orbital mechanics, I can't give the lesson now, but you can see the sun off to the side just kind of doing this little spin around Earth. This is what it's like to do one orbit around the planet. And this is not a sunrise, this is a moonrise. This is just the moon coming up. You can see that thick brown line with some stars rising. One of the amazing things, I never expected this, but you can actually see sand dunes. So this is the Namib Desert in Namibia in Africa. They're the tallest, I remember thinking, those are some big sand dunes. So I Googled it. They're the tallest sand dunes on Earth. They're about 6 or probably 700 meters tall, but you can actually see them from space. And this is the Bahamas. These are sand dunes also, except for they're made with, the fluid is water and not air. And I don't know if you guys can recognize this. There's Estonia, it's kind of hard to see. We don't actually fly over Estonia. We only go to 51 degrees north, so Estonia was always like off to the side. But it's very beautiful from space. And so with that, there's a couple of lessons that I learned. There's 2 quick lessons before I run out of time I want to talk about that were not just beautiful planet, and that is, the first one was seeing wealth and politics from space. You can see where things are going well on Earth at night, there's a lot of city lights. You can look at Western Europe, you can look at Saudi Arabia, right? Not very many people, a lot of lights on. And then you see Africa, a lot of basically failed states there. There are very terrible political conditions, bad economic conditions. And I did not expect to see that, be able to see that from space. And the other thing, the environment, I want to talk about two quick environmental problems that you can see. One of them is pollution, and the vast majority of Earth is a beautiful planet. But this is China, actually, and it should not be so brown. The reason it's that brown is from coal-fired power plants. India is not quite as bad, but India is also very smoggy. Personally, those are the only two places that I could actually see pollution. And then this is another one that's really not a good thing at all. This is really bad. This should be a dark green slide with just some clouds. This is actually the Amazon being deforested. NASA has some really terrible time lapses of the Amazon from the 80s to today, and you see these little green spots growing and growing where the deforestation is. And if you need trees, you could probably get trees forever in Estonia by managing the forest, but the rainforest is not the place to do that. So those are the two environmental issues that I saw, and I am out of time, so I think we're going to do a couple of quick questions with, there we go.
Yes.
I was talking fast. 15 minutes is really fast.
Really good. Really good. I have a few questions because we have little time.
Yeah.
You already touched the topic of sustainability in some way, about that we don't have another planet.
Yeah.
Can you mention a few more things that being in space teach you about sustainability? Is there any other things about...
Well, the one thing in space, everything comes from Earth, so you need to be very careful about what you use. We had to exercise 2.5 hours a day, completely sweaty, and we got one shirt for 2 weeks. So if you have an Under Armour t-shirt and you try and wear the same shirt for 2 weeks, after one day it stinks, after 2 weeks it's bad. And we use this wool called merino wool. You can wear merino wool forever and it doesn't stink. I wore it for a month every day, didn't wash it, and it didn't stink at all. So there's materials you can use. I learned that you really don't need that much. Like in America, we have houses full of stuff and you don't need that stuff. So learning to not have as much stuff is probably a healthier way to learn to live. And then using the right things that can last longer and not require a bunch of care. Just being smart about living the way you live can really improve sustainability. In space, like you have to do that or you won't survive.
Do you think that it's possible, okay, not in the next decade, but in the future that space exploration also becomes sustainable? Because it's not sustainable, of course, now.
Well, the problem with space exploration is you have to go from 0 to 25,000 kilometers an hour, and that's a lot of energy. We all learned in physics class, energy is 1/2 mv squared. So your v is a really big number, and you're squaring it. So you need a lot of energy if you're going to leave Earth. So there's different ways to do it. The reality is there's just not that many rocket launches. I mean, compared to electric plants or cars or food production, space is not noticeable, but you do need to go fast, and that's not going to ever change.
Okay, thank you. And the last question, did your perception of yourself changed in space? If yes, then how?
So I think, I've thought about this a lot, and when I was young, I was very black and white, like, this is good, that's bad, this guy's bad, this guy's good, or whatever, and I realized that there's shades of gray, not 50 shades of gray, but there's shades of gray. And I'm a much less black and white person. Now, what Putin is doing in Ukraine is not gray, that's black. Like, that is not good. And I just want to say thank you to Estonia, by the way. As an American, Americans don't understand what's happening here. You guys have a century of history, you understand very well. And Estonia is a leader, and you've supported Ukraine so much, so thank you for doing that. But for me personally, I think I have a lot more sense of shades of gray rather than black and white.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
That was fast.
Out of
Thank
time.
you guys.
I have so much questions, but...
There's some books. You can read the answers in the books.
Yeah, probably about how do you adapt when you're putting down the objects after you're on Earth again, because you get too used to it that you can put those.
Yeah. After a couple months in space, if I wanted to give this to you, I would do this and it would fall. So yeah, you have to remember there's gravity when you get back.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
It was great.